You stand in the cool dawn air of the Ethiopian Highlands, where the mountains rise in soft green folds and the mist hangs over the slopes like a blanket that has not quite decided to wake up. The grass is wet. The wind is gentle. Somewhere nearby, a goat is making very poor dietary decisions. Before you get too comfortable in this ancient landscape, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in tonight, feel free to leave a comment telling everyone where in the world you're listening from and what your local time is. There is something strangely comforting about knowing that while you drift towards sleep, someone else is listening at 2:17 a.m. in a city you may never visit. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk along a narrow mountain path, following a young goat herd named Kaldi, or at least that is the name later storytellers give him. Scholars still argue whether Kaldi ever existed at all, but that has never stopped history from assigning very important jobs to very convenient characters. In the story, Kaldi notices that his goats are behaving oddly after eating bright red berries from a certain shrub. They leap. They prance. They headbutt one another with unusual enthusiasm. They refuse to settle down for the night. In other words, they behave much like modern humans after insisting they can definitely handle just one more espresso. This is one of the most famous legends in the history of coffee. Whether or not it happened, the setting is real enough. You are in the region of Kaffa, in what is now Ethiopia, where wild coffee plants have grown for thousands of years. The plant is known as Coffea arabica, and this species remains the source of much of the world's coffee today. That is your first mainstream historical fact for the evening. Arabica coffee most likely originated in the forests of Ethiopia, where it grew naturally long before anyone thought to charge $7 for it. You kneel beside the shrub. Its leaves are glossy and dark green. The berries are small and red, almost jewel-like. Inside each fruit are 2 seeds. Those seeds, once roasted and brewed, will become one of the most influential beverages in human history. At the moment, however, they are simply berries. And the goats are very energetic. One goat bounds onto a rock and stares at you with unsettling confidence. Another races in circles. A third seems to be contemplating a speech. You get the distinct impression that if goats invented civilization, they would also invent coffee and then hold meetings that should have been emails. The local people of these highlands may have used coffee long before it was brewed as a drink. Some traditions suggest that the beans were crushed and mixed with animal fat to create compact, energy-rich food. Imagine a sort of ancient power snack, less glamorous than a cafe latte, but much more practical when climbing mountains. This is tonight's odd and quirky detail. The earliest uses of coffee may have involved eating it rather than drinking it. You continue through the forest, where tall trees filter the sunlight and birds call from the canopy. Here, wild coffee grows in the shade. The environment is ideal: high altitude, moderate temperatures, and seasonal rains. Coffee is surprisingly particular. It likes the kind of conditions that humans describe as pleasant and that farmers describe as, if one thing changes, I panic. The people who live in these regions know the forest intimately. They understand which plants heal, which nourish, and which should be left alone unless you are a goat with questionable judgment. Some point, someone experiments. Perhaps berries are chewed for energy. Perhaps seeds are dried. Perhaps they are ground and mixed into food. Over generations, knowledge accumulates quietly. Great historical changes often begin this way, not with trumpets, but with curiosity and a willingness to taste something that looks suspicious. You sit beside a small fire as evening approaches. The smoke rises in a thin blue ribbon. Nearby, elders share stories. In this world, knowledge travels by memory and repetition. Useful discoveries spread from family to family, village to village, carried by traders, pilgrims, and wandering shepherds. Coffee is still local. It has not crossed seas. It has not fueled empires. It has not inspired philosophers to become unbearably confident. It is simply a plant in a forest and a possibility in the human mind. Scholars still argue whether the stimulating properties of coffee were first recognized through direct experimentation, observation of animals, or gradual cultural practice. Like many origins, the truth is likely less dramatic than the legend and more interesting because it unfolded over time. Night falls over the Ethiopian mountains. The air turns cooler. The stars brighten overhead. The goats, finally tiring, settle into the grass, though one still appears to be reconsidering all of its life choices. You hold a few dried coffee seeds in your hand. They are small enough to overlook, ordinary enough to ignore. Yet inside them lies a chain of events that will stretch across continents. These seeds will travel to Yemen. Mystics will use them to stay awake through prayer. Merchants will guard them as a valuable commodity. Coffee houses will emerge as centers of conversation and controversy. Governments will attempt bans. Smugglers will steal plants. Plantation economies will rise. Revolutions will be discussed over steaming cups. One day, millions of people will begin each morning with these seeds transformed by heat and water. Some will drink coffee from delicate porcelain. Some from paper cups in crowded trains. Some from chipped mugs at kitchen tables before sunrise. Some will insist they are not functioning yet until caffeine enters the bloodstream and restores their ability to answer basic questions. But all of that lies far ahead. For now, you remain in the birthplace of coffee. The forest hums softly around you. Leaves rustle. Insects chirp. The embers glow. You feel the immense calm of standing at the beginning of a story so large that no one here can yet imagine it. The discovery of coffee is not a single moment but a long, gradual recognition between people and a plant. The forest offers. Humans notice. Tradition preserves. Curiosity expands. And history, as it so often does, begins with something small. A berry. A seed. A sleepless goat. You watch the first light of dawn touch the mountains again. Somewhere in the trees, the coffee shrubs continue to grow exactly as they always have, indifferent to fame, markets, and future cafe menus. They do not know they are about to conquer the world. And perhaps that is the most relaxing thought of all. The mountains of Ethiopia fade slowly behind you. Not all at once. History rarely moves with dramatic transitions. There is no giant arrow pointing across the Red Sea. No narrator appears from the clouds announcing that coffee is about to become internationally famous. Instead, the movement begins quietly, the way many important things do, with traders carrying ordinary sacks through dangerous landscapes while trying not to lose their sandals. You travel northward along winding paths used by merchants, pilgrims, and wandering scholars. The roads are not really roads in the modern sense. They are trails formed by repetition. Footsteps become paths. Paths become trade routes. Trade routes become arteries through which ideas, spices, fabrics, stories, and eventually coffee move across the world. The air grows warmer as you descend from the Ethiopian Highlands toward the coastal regions near the Red Sea. Here the world feels different. The mountains give way to dry hills and rocky ground. Acacia trees twist in the heat. Wind carries dust instead of cool forest mist. Somewhere nearby, merchants argue over the value of salt with the emotional intensity of modern people debating internet comments. Coffee travels in small quantities at first. Dried berries. Seeds. Fragments of knowledge. Perhaps a traveler carries them simply because they are useful during long journeys. Perhaps monks or healers experiment with them out of curiosity. No one yet understands the scale of what is beginning. The Red Sea stretches before you like polished blue metal beneath the sun. Wooden boats rock gently near the shore. Sailors load cargo into narrow vessels with triangular sails. Ivory, spices, cloth, incense, and bundles of dried goods pass from hand to hand. Among them are coffee seeds. This crossing, from Ethiopia into Yemen, is one of the most important transitions in the history of coffee. While the plant likely originated in Ethiopia, many historians believe Yemen was where coffee drinking truly developed into a widespread cultural practice. You step aboard a small dhow as gulls wheel overhead. The boat creaks softly. Ropes strain in the wind. Sailors move with calm efficiency born from repetition and survival. One man drinks from a clay cup while staring at the horizon with the exhausted expression of someone who has spent too much time explaining directions to tourists. The sea journey is not especially comfortable. The boat pitches over dark waves. Water sprays across the deck. Supplies must be protected carefully from moisture. Everyone smells faintly of salt, wood smoke, and long-term inconvenience. But eventually the coast of Yemen rises from the horizon. The land appears rugged and sunlit, its mountains rising steeply above coastal plains. Villages cling to hillsides. Stone buildings tower several stories high, their windows decorated with glowing white gypsum patterns. You have arrived in Arabia. And here, coffee begins its transformation from local curiosity into ritual. The highlands of Yemen prove surprisingly suitable for cultivating coffee plants. Terraced farms climb mountain slopes like giant staircases carved into the earth. Farmers tend the shrubs with woven baskets tied around their waists. Red coffee cherries gleam in the early morning light. Unlike the wild forests of Ethiopia, coffee here is increasingly cultivated deliberately. This matters. Human civilization changes when people stop merely finding useful plants and begin organizing entire systems around growing them. Agriculture turns accidents into economies. At first, coffee in Yemen may still have been consumed in forms quite different from the modern drink. Some accounts suggest the fruit pulp was used in beverages before roasted beans became standard. Over time, experimentation continued. Eventually, someone roasts the seeds. You can almost imagine the moment. Perhaps beans are placed too close to a fire. Perhaps someone notices the rich aroma released by heat. Perhaps curiosity wins again, as it so often does in history. The smell would have been extraordinary. Warm, bitter, nutty, smoky. A scent unlike anything else in the ancient world. Nearby, a goat immediately becomes interested again, proving once and for all that goats are deeply committed to involving themselves in major historical developments. The roasted beans are ground. Hot water is added. A dark liquid emerges. Coffee, as you would recognize it, begins to exist. The drink spreads gradually through religious communities, especially among Sufi mystics in Yemen. Now the nights become important. You enter a quiet Sufi lodge illuminated by oil lamps. The room glows with amber light against whitewashed walls. Men in simple robes sit together in prayer and recitation. Outside, the desert wind moves softly through narrow streets. The Sufis seek spiritual focus through long nights of devotion. Sleep can become an obstacle during extended prayer. Coffee, with its stimulating effects, proves useful. This is one of the great historical ironies of coffee. Today many people drink it to survive office meetings that should have ended 40 minutes earlier. But one of its earliest widespread uses may have been helping mystics remain spiritually awake through the night. A servant pours dark coffee into small cups. The drink is bitter, strong, earthy. You take a sip. There is no sugar, no flavored syrup, no whipped cream, no caramel drizzle with a name longer than a medieval royal title. Just roasted coffee and water. And somehow, it works. The warmth spreads slowly through your body. Your thoughts sharpen. The exhaustion of travel retreats slightly into the background. Around you, the prayers continue in rhythmic whispers. Coffee becomes intertwined with wakefulness, devotion, concentration, and conversation. In Arabic, the drink comes to be known as kahwa, a word whose earlier meanings may have referred to wine or other stimulating beverages. Language shifts around important things. Soon coffee spreads outward from religious circles into marketplaces and homes. The city of Mocha grows increasingly important. Yes, that Mocha. Today the word often suggests chocolate-flavored coffee drinks topped with enough whipped cream to qualify as architecture. But originally Mocha referred to the Yemeni port city that became one of the world's most famous coffee trading centers. You stand on the busy docks of Mocha as merchants negotiate loudly beneath striped awnings. Ships arrive from across the Indian Ocean. Workers haul sacks through crowded streets. The smell of spices fills the air: cardamom, cinnamon, pepper, incense, and coffee. Especially coffee. For centuries, Yemen carefully guarded coffee cultivation. Exporters often attempted to prevent fertile seeds from leaving the region. Beans were sometimes partially roasted or boiled before export so they could not grow elsewhere. Human history repeatedly demonstrates that if something becomes profitable, people immediately begin trying to smuggle it. Coffee will not escape this pattern. But for now, Yemen holds extraordinary influence over the global coffee trade. In the evenings, coffee houses begin appearing in cities across Arabia. These early coffee houses are unlike anything many societies have experienced before. People gather not to become drunk or disorderly, but alert and conversational. This alarms authorities almost immediately. You enter a crowded coffee house lit by hanging lamps. Scholars debate theology in one corner. Merchants discuss prices in another. Travelers exchange stories from distant cities. A musician plucks softly at a stringed instrument while someone nearby appears dangerously close to explaining philosophy for the third consecutive hour. In many ways, the coffee house becomes an early engine of public discussion. People think together there. Governments throughout history have often felt uneasy about places where large groups of awake people gather to exchange opinions. Coffee houses will eventually earn nicknames like schools of the wise. They will also earn suspicion, bans, and accusations of encouraging political trouble. Honestly, authorities would probably have preferred the goats. But those conflicts still lie ahead. For now, night settles softly over Yemen. Lantern light flickers across stone walls. The streets quiet gradually. In hillside terraces beyond the city, coffee shrubs rustle gently in the warm wind. Inside homes and lodges and coffee houses, small cups continue to pass from hand to hand. A plant from the forests of Ethiopia has crossed the sea and found a new identity. Not merely food. Not merely berries. A drink. A ritual. A conversation. And from here, coffee will continue outward into the world. From the terraces of Yemen, coffee continues its slow and remarkably determined journey into the wider Islamic world. The route leads north and west, toward cities that are already among the most important centers of trade, religion, and scholarship on earth. You follow caravans moving through dry valleys and along coastal roads. Camels step with patient rhythm, their bells chiming softly in the morning air. Merchants travel wrapped in long robes, carrying spices, textiles, incense, and sacks of dark beans whose future importance is still underestimated by almost everyone except a handful of farmers and a growing number of sleep-deprived mystics. Ahead lies Mecca. Even before coffee arrives, Mecca is one of the great crossroads of the world. Pilgrims journey there from across Africa, Arabia, Persia, Central Asia, and beyond. They bring languages, customs, and stories. They also carry home new ideas. This is how many transformative things spread. Not by conquest. Not by decree. But by people meeting one another, sharing a cup, and saying, You really should try this. In the evenings, pilgrims gather in courtyards and lodgings after long days of prayer and travel. Small cups are passed around. The drink is dark, bitter, and invigorating. Conversation grows more animated. Eyes open wider. Someone who had been nodding off suddenly becomes very interested in theology. Coffee finds a natural home in a city where wakefulness and reflection are deeply valued. Soon, however, its popularity attracts attention from authorities. This is another recurring pattern in history. If enough people begin enjoying something while talking enthusiastically, someone in power will eventually ask whether this is allowed. Some religious scholars praise coffee for aiding devotion. Others question its effects and the gatherings it inspires. Debates emerge over whether the beverage is beneficial, suspicious, or merely too enjoyable for comfort. At various points, coffee faces attempts at prohibition. Shops are closed. Beans are confiscated. Arguments become impressively technical. Yet coffee survives. It survives because people like it. It survives because it is useful. And it survives because banning a beloved daily habit is rarely as simple as issuing a stern announcement. You can almost hear the collective response. Respectfully, no. From Mecca, coffee spreads to Cairo. The city unfolds before you like a living tapestry. Minarets rise above crowded streets. Donkeys weave through markets. Boats drift along the Nile River. Scholars debate in mosque courtyards. Artisans hammer copper into shining trays. And everywhere, people are talking. Cairo is one of the intellectual and commercial capitals of the medieval world, and coffee fits into it with surprising ease. You enter an early coffee house just after sunset. The room is lit by oil lamps suspended from carved wooden beams. Men sit on low stools. Some play board games. Others read aloud from books. Merchants discuss prices. Poets test new verses. A storyteller gestures dramatically while an audience listens with the serious concentration usually reserved for tax exemptions. The cups are small, but the conversations are enormous. Coffee houses offer something unusual. A place where strangers can gather, remain alert, and exchange ideas for hours. No one needs to own a palace. No one needs to belong to the nobility. You need only a few coins and a willingness to sit still while someone explains, in unnecessary detail, why their opinion about politics is unquestionably correct. In this way, coffee begins shaping public life. Not by force, but by extending human attention. The more historians study coffee houses, the more they appear as important social technologies. They create structured spaces for thought. They help merchants form networks. They allow scholars to debate. They provide travelers with news. They give ordinary people access to conversations larger than themselves. All of this from a seed once noticed by a very enthusiastic goat. The Nile River flows quietly under moonlight. In homes and courtyards across Cairo, the aroma of roasted coffee drifts into the night. The drink has crossed seas and deserts. It has moved from forests to monasteries to ports to sacred cities. And now it settles into the rhythms of urban life, where it will continue to sharpen minds, lengthen conversations, and occasionally keep people awake far later than originally intended. Ahead lies the Ottoman Empire, where coffee will become both art and institution. And history, fully caffeinated, continues onward. The story now carries you to one of the most powerful empires of the early modern world. The Ottoman Empire stretches across 3 continents. Its territories connect the Balkans, Anatolia, the Middle East, North Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Caravans cross deserts. Ships move through crowded ports. Languages mingle in bazaars. Laws, customs, and recipes travel together in ways that would make any modern logistics company both impressed and deeply anxious. And among the many goods circulating through this vast imperial network, coffee becomes one of the most beloved. You arrive in Constantinople, known today as Istanbul. The city rises before you in layers of domes, minarets, markets, and harbors. The waters of the Bosporus shimmer in the afternoon light. Ferries and merchant ships glide between Europe and Asia. The streets are alive with artisans, sailors, scholars, merchants, and cats who move with the quiet certainty of creatures fully aware that the city belongs to them. Some things, it seems, do not change. The year is the 16th century. Coffee has already become familiar throughout the Islamic world, but in Istanbul it reaches a new level of refinement. Here, coffee is not merely consumed. It is prepared with ceremony, served with elegance, discussed with seriousness, and occasionally judged by people who have very strong opinions about grind size. You step into a bustling coffee house near the Grand Bazaar. The room is warm and fragrant. Brass lamps cast soft golden light across painted walls. Cushions line the edges of the room. Men in flowing robes sit in groups, speaking in low voices. A storyteller recites epic tales. Two scholars debate astronomy. A merchant quietly calculates profits. In one corner, a man appears to be explaining politics with such confidence that he may never stop. Tiny cups rest on ornate trays. The coffee is prepared in a small long-handled pot called a sezvi. Finely ground beans are mixed with water and heated slowly over hot sand or glowing coals. The resulting drink is dark, rich, and intense. Grounds settle to the bottom of the cup, where they will later inspire fortune-tellers and, no doubt, several very inaccurate predictions. You lift the cup. The aroma is deep and comforting. The taste is bold, bitter, and velvety. It is unlike the rough early brews of previous centuries. Coffee has become an art. This method, now known worldwide as Turkish coffee, remains one of the oldest continuously practiced brewing traditions. That is tonight's historical fact. Many elements of modern coffee culture, careful brewing, dedicated coffee houses, and ritualized serving, were perfected in the Ottoman world. The coffee houses of Istanbul become known as schools of knowledge. This nickname is not entirely exaggerated. People gather to hear poetry, discuss science, trade news, and exchange ideas from across the empire. Literacy grows. Stories spread. Friendships form. Rumors multiply with impressive speed and questionable accuracy. In practical terms, the coffee house becomes a social institution. In human terms, it becomes a place where people say, "I'll just stay for one cup," and emerge for hours later having learned about astronomy, politics, and someone's cousin's suspicious business venture. Naturally, authorities become cautious. The Ottoman government sometimes worries that coffee houses encourage criticism and dissent. Sultans and officials issue periodic restrictions. Shops are closed. Patrons are warned. Yet coffee always returns. It returns because it is woven into daily life. It returns because conversation is difficult to suppress. And it returns because an empire of millions has collectively decided that mornings are significantly improved by hot caffeinated beverages. You walk through the palace kitchens of the Ottoman Empire. Copper pots gleam in orderly rows. Servants grind beans with practiced precision. Special attendants prepare coffee for the Sultan and his guests. Presentation matters. Cups are delicate. Trays are polished. Hospitality is elevated to ceremony. Offering coffee becomes a gesture of respect. Receiving coffee becomes a mark of welcome. Even marriage customs are touched by the drink. In some traditions, a prospective bride serves coffee to her suitor's family. If the coffee is excellent, everyone smiles. If it is unusually salty, the groom is being tested to see whether he can accept life's unexpected flavors with dignity. This is one of history's most elegant relationship assessments. Can you remain gracious while drinking what tastes like the ocean? If so, perhaps you are ready for marriage. Outside the palace, the city settles into evening. The call to prayer drifts across rooftops. Boats rock gently at the harbor. Lanterns flicker in narrow streets. From countless homes and coffee houses, the familiar aroma rises into the night. Coffee has become inseparable from hospitality, intellect, and urban life. It is no longer merely a useful stimulant. It is a cultural language. A cup can mean friendship, respect, negotiation, reflection, or simply the universal desire to stay awake long enough to finish one more conversation. Soon, merchants and diplomats will carry this drink into Europe. Some will greet it with enthusiasm, others with suspicion. A few will describe it as fascinating, exotic, and slightly alarming. But they will keep drinking it. And the world, once again, will change over a small cup of something dark and warm. From the great coffee houses of Istanbul, the story moves westward. Ships cross the Mediterranean. Caravans carry sacks through ports and warehouses. Diplomats return home with new tastes and stronger opinions. And Europe, which has already developed a considerable talent for importing fascinating things from elsewhere and then arguing intensely about them, is about to discover coffee. At first, the drink seems unusual. Europeans are accustomed to beer, wine, and ale as common beverages. Water in crowded cities is not always reliable, and fermented drinks are often safer and more familiar. Into this world arrives a dark, bitter liquid from the Islamic world, served hot and associated with merchants, scholars, and exotic trade routes. Reactions are mixed. Some people are intrigued. Some are suspicious. And some take one sip, make a face, and then immediately ask for another cup. You arrive in Venice in the early 17th century. The city rises from the water like a dream of stone and reflected light. Merchant ships crowd the canals. Warehouses overflow with silk, spices, and precious goods from the east. Traders in richly colored robes negotiate with the focused intensity of people who have spent their lives calculating profit margins. Among the imported luxuries is coffee. Venice becomes one of the first major European gateways for the beverage. In apothecaries and specialty shops, the beans are sold as an exotic medicinal substance. Shopkeepers claim coffee aids digestion, improves alertness, and helps with a remarkable variety of ailments, some of which are genuine and some of which are clearly optimistic. In fairness, makes mornings tolerable is a respectable medical benefit. You step into an early Venetian coffee house. The room is elegant and softly lit. Marble tables reflect candlelight. Merchants in velvet cloaks speak in hushed tones. A scholar scribbles notes. A sailor studies a map. Outside, gondolas drift quietly through the canals. A silver tray arrives. On it rests a small porcelain cup. The aroma is rich and unfamiliar. You taste the drink. Bitter. Warm. Complex. And deeply compelling. Coffee spreads quickly through Italian cities. Soon, coffee houses appear in Rome, Florence, and beyond. Not everyone approves. Because coffee originates in Muslim lands, some religious critics view it with suspicion. Stories later claim that certain church authorities considered whether the drink should be condemned. According to a famous tradition, Pope Clement VIII tasted coffee himself and found it so enjoyable that he allegedly declared it too good to leave to non-Christians alone. Whether every detail of this story is perfectly accurate matters less than the larger truth. Once influential Europeans tried coffee, widespread adoption became increasingly inevitable. The beverage moves north. To London. To Paris. To Vienna. And with each new city, coffee acquires fresh meanings. In England, coffee houses multiply with astonishing speed. You enter a busy London coffeehouse in the late 17th century. Rain taps softly against the windows. Candles flicker. Men in wigs and wool coats crowd around wooden tables. Newspapers are read aloud. Merchants discuss shipping. Scientists debate natural philosophy. Politicians whisper. Pamphlets change hands. For the price of 1 penny, a customer can buy a cup of coffee and access a world of information. This leads to the nickname penny universities. It is an extraordinary idea. For a modest cost, anyone with curiosity can listen to conversations about trade, astronomy, politics, and literature. Some patrons become better informed. Some become more argumentative. Many become both. Insurance markets, newspapers, and business partnerships emerge from these environments. Lloyd's of London traces its roots to a coffeehouse where merchants gather to discuss ships and cargo. This is tonight's historical fact: coffeehouses helped shape institutions that still influence the modern world. Meanwhile in Paris, philosophers and writers gather over steaming cups. In Vienna, coffee culture develops its own elegant traditions, complete with pastries and the enduring belief that any difficult question becomes slightly more manageable when accompanied by both caffeine and dessert. European coffeehouses become centers of the Enlightenment. Ideas about science, economics, government, and human rights circulate through rooms scented with roasted beans. The drink does not create these ideas by itself. Coffee is not secretly writing philosophical treatises after midnight. But it supports the conditions in which focused conversation can flourish. It keeps minds awake. It lengthens discussions. It turns private thought into public exchange. And it offers a practical alternative to beginning the day with ale. The shift is subtle but significant. A society that spends more time alert and discussing complex ideas may eventually produce remarkable changes. Empires will be questioned. Experiments will be conducted. Revolutions will be imagined. And in the background, someone will always be saying, "One more cup." As evening settles over Europe, coffeehouses glow like warm lanterns in great cities. In Venice, reflections shimmer on the canals. In London, fog drifts along narrow streets. In Paris, carriage wheels echo over stone. Inside these rooms, cups clink gently against saucers. Pages turn. Pens scratch. Conversations continue long into the night. The berries once noticed in the forests of Ethiopia have now entered the intellectual bloodstream of an entire continent. And soon, European demand will grow so intense that nations will compete fiercely to cultivate coffee themselves. Seeds will be stolen. Plants will be smuggled. Tropical colonies will be transformed. The world is about to become very, very interested in growing more coffee. By the 18th century, coffee is no longer a curiosity. It is a habit. A commodity. A daily ritual. And, perhaps most importantly, a companion to thought. Across Europe, the Enlightenment is unfolding. Scientists observe the natural world with new precision. Philosophers question old assumptions. Economists study trade and labor. Writers imagine better systems of government. Printers produce newspapers and books at astonishing speed. Ideas move through cities like sparks carried on the wind. And very often, those sparks are discussed over coffee. You step into a Parisian cafe on a cool evening in the mid-18th century. Candles glow in mirrored walls. Marble tables reflect flickering light. Waiters in crisp coats carry porcelain cups and silver pots. Outside, carriages rattle over cobblestones. Inside, voices murmur in French, rising and falling like a tide of elegant disagreement. At one table, two men debate whether reason should guide society. At another, a writer edits a satirical essay sharp enough to irritate at least 3 powerful institutions before breakfast. In the corner, someone insists that history is changing. For once, that person is correct. Among the regulars of Europe's cafes are some of the most influential thinkers of the age. Voltaire reportedly consumed astonishing quantities of coffee, sometimes mixed with chocolate. Accounts differ on the exact number of cups, but all agree it was enough to make modern office workers feel seen. Denis Diderot labors over the monumental Encyclopédie, a vast attempt to gather and organize human knowledge. Jean-Jacques Rousseau reflects on society, liberty, and education. These thinkers do not owe their ideas to caffeine alone. Coffee does not compose philosophical treatises by itself. But it provides a setting, a place to think, a reason to gather, an excuse to remain awake just long enough to ask one more difficult question. You continue to Edinburgh, where the Scottish Enlightenment is flourishing. The air is cool and damp. Stone buildings line narrow streets. In taverns and coffee houses, scholars discuss economics, history, morality, and the nature of human society. David Hume speaks with calm skepticism. Adam Smith develops ideas that will shape modern economics. It is a remarkable scene. Concepts that will influence markets, governments, and universities are refined in rooms where cups are refilled and arguments continue well past sunset. This is tonight's historical fact. Coffee houses played a significant role in the intellectual networks of the Enlightenment by giving thinkers regular spaces to meet, debate, and exchange ideas. In London, scientists gather at coffee houses before and after meetings of the Royal Society. Experiments are described. Observations are challenged. Wild hypotheses are proposed. Some transform science. Others are gently set aside, much like an oversteeped pot. You sit at a wooden table while rain taps against the windows. A natural philosopher sketches planetary motions. A mathematician fills a page with symbols. A printer folds the latest newspaper. Someone in the next room is confidently explaining a theory that sounds improbable but may eventually win a prize. The atmosphere is electric, though the word electric still refers mainly to curious effects involving rubbed amber and very surprised onlookers. Coffee encourages a new rhythm of life. Mornings begin earlier. Work extends longer. Attention becomes more disciplined. The change is subtle but widespread. For centuries, many Europeans commonly consumed beer or ale throughout the day. Coffee offers another option, one associated not with relaxation, but with alertness. The transition does not happen overnight. Human habits rarely do. But over time, coffee becomes linked with punctuality, calculation, and concentrated effort. Merchants balance ledgers. Scientists record measurements. Writers revise manuscripts. Students underline passages they will later pretend they fully understood. In all these quiet moments, coffee stands nearby. There is something comforting about this continuity. Whether in an Ottoman coffee house, a Parisian cafe, or a modern kitchen before sunrise, the experience is familiar. A warm cup. A sharper mind. The sense that thought itself has become slightly easier to hold. As the century progresses, the ideas discussed in cafes begin reshaping the world. Revolutions are imagined. Constitutions are drafted. Economic systems are debated. Libraries expand. Universities grow. The consequences are profound. Yet the scene remains wonderfully ordinary. A table. A lamp. A few pages. The aroma of roasted beans. And a group of people trying, as humans always have, to understand how the world works. Night deepens over Europe. Candles burn lower. The streets grow quiet. Inside the cafes, the final cups are poured. Pens scratch across paper. Arguments soften into reflection. The great questions of the age linger in the warm air. And somewhere in the background, Coffee waits patiently for the next generation of thinkers to arrive. By the 18th century, Europe has developed an insatiable appetite for coffee. Merchants cannot import enough. Ports overflow with sacks of beans. Coffeehouses remain crowded from dawn until late evening. And governments begin asking a simple question. What if we could grow coffee ourselves? This thought appears practical. It will also reshape tropical landscapes across the globe. For many years, Yemen had guarded its coffee monopoly carefully. But no monopoly lasts forever when enough ambitious botanists, sailors, and empire builders decide they would very much like a living plant. The Dutch East India Company is among the first to succeed. Coffee seedlings are cultivated in colonial gardens on the island of Java. The climate is ideal. Volcanic soil nourishes the shrubs. Seasonal rains arrive on schedule. And coffee flourishes. Soon, a cup of Java becomes a lasting nickname for coffee itself. The French follow. Legend tells of a young naval officer, Gabriel de Clew, who carries a precious coffee seedling across the Atlantic to Martinique. During storms, pirate threats, and shortages of fresh water, he reportedly shares his own ration with the plant. Few acts in history have demonstrated such devotion to agriculture. The seedling survives. From it, millions of coffee trees eventually spread through the Caribbean and Latin America. The Portuguese expand cultivation in Brazil. The Spanish plant coffee in Central and South America. The British experiment in their colonies. One species from the forests of Ethiopia now circles the globe. But this expansion carries a darker history. Large coffee plantations depend heavily on enslaved labor and coercive colonial systems. Across the Americas, countless people are forced to plant, tend, harvest, and process the crop under brutal conditions. The morning comfort enjoyed in distant cities is often built upon suffering hidden far from the cup. This is an essential part of coffee's story. History is rarely only soothing. Yet even within this complexity, the plant continues its quiet growth. Rows of glossy shrubs cover hillsides. White flowers bloom with a fragrance like jasmine. Green cherries ripen to yellow and then deep red. Workers pick each fruit by hand. The cycle repeats, season after season. The coffee tree does not know who owns the land. It simply responds to rain, soil, and sunlight. And humanity, for better and worse, builds vast systems around it. The rise of Brazil. In the 19th century, Brazil becomes the dominant force in global coffee production. The scale is astonishing. Plantations stretch across the countryside like green oceans. Railways are built to move sacks to coastal ports. Warehouses rise in growing cities. Bankers, merchants, and politicians all watch the harvest with intense interest. Coffee shapes the nation's economy. In some periods, it is so important that the phrase "coffee with milk politics" emerges, describing alliances between regional elites and the dairy-producing state of Minas Gerais. History, it turns out, can be both grand and unexpectedly agricultural. You walk through a Brazilian plantation at dawn. Mist hangs over rolling hills. Workers move between rows of shrubs carrying woven baskets. Birds call from distant trees. The scent of wet earth rises with the morning light. Millions upon millions of berries are harvested, dried, hulled, sorted, and packed. Then they travel outward to the world. To New York. To London. To Paris. To Calcutta. To any city where someone sits at a table and thinks, "I do not feel fully operational yet." Brazil's influence becomes so large that weather in one region can affect prices worldwide. A frost in the hills. A drought in the growing season. And suddenly merchants on other continents become very concerned. This is tonight's historical fact. For much of the modern era, Brazil has been the world's largest coffee producer. The global economy, in a small but meaningful way, learns to pay close attention to the temperature of Brazilian mornings, factories, trains, and the modern morning. The Industrial Revolution changes coffee once again. Steamships move beans more efficiently. Railroads connect farms to ports. Factories roast at large scale. Packaging improves. Coffee becomes more consistent, more accessible, and more deeply integrated into daily life. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, brands emerge. Advertising expands. Breakfast habits change. Office work increases. Cities wake earlier and work longer. Coffee becomes the quiet engine of punctual modernity. You stand in a roasting factory as great drums turn slowly over heat. Beans tumble and darken. Their color shifts from pale green to cinnamon, chestnut, and deep brown. The room fills with a rich aroma that seems to promise competence. Nearby, workers package the roasted beans into tins and paper bags. Train whistles sound outside. Crates are loaded and sent across the country. Soon, households brew coffee before sunrise. Parents pour the first cup while the house is still silent. Students revise notes under yellow lamps. Doctors begin hospital rounds. Writers face blank pages. Railway workers check schedules. Factory managers unlock doors. The modern day begins with a familiar ritual. Boil water. Grind beans. Wait for the first comforting aroma to fill the room. In the 20th century, instant coffee appears, followed by electric coffee makers, espresso machines, and a remarkable number of devices all claiming to produce the perfect cup. Humans are endlessly inventive when motivated by the desire to wake up. Coffee in the present day. Today, coffee is one of the most widely traded agricultural commodities in the world. It is grown across the bean belt, the tropical regions between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Major producers include Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, Ethiopia, and many others. Farmers still monitor rainfall and soil. Pickers still gather ripe cherries. Roasters still listen for the crack of expanding beans. Baristas still refine techniques with the concentration of miniature alchemists. And sleepy people everywhere still reach for a cup before answering difficult questions such as, "What day is it? Where are my keys? Why did I stay awake reading about the history of coffee?" From traditional Turkish coffee to Italian espresso, from Ethiopian ceremonies to cold brew in glass bottles, coffee appears in countless forms. Some drink it black. Some add milk and sugar. Some add spices. Some create beverages whose ingredient lists resemble festive engineering projects. Yet beneath every variation lies the same basic transformation. A seed. Heat. Water. Attention. And a moment of pause. A quiet return to the highlands. Now, as this long journey draws to a close, you return in your mind to the Ethiopian Highlands where the story began. The air is cool again. Mist drifts across the mountains. Grass bends gently in the dawn wind. Wild coffee shrubs grow beneath the forest canopy exactly as they have for thousands of years. The berries are small and red. The leaves are dark and glossy. Nearby, goats graze with the same serene indifference to global trade, economic theory, and international cafe culture. One pauses to look at a coffee branch with suspicious interest. Some traditions never fade. You sit quietly beside the shrubs. The world feels very still. Across centuries, coffee has traveled from forest to monastery, from port to palace, from coffeehouse to laboratory, from plantation to kitchen table. It has fueled prayers, poems, scientific discoveries, revolutions, and ordinary mornings. It has accompanied merchants, mystics, philosophers, and students. It has been praised, taxed, banned, smuggled, cultivated, industrialized, and endlessly discussed. And through all of this, the plant itself has remained wonderfully simple. A small tree. White flowers. Red fruit. 2 seeds hidden inside. The first sunlight touches the leaves. Birdsong rises in the distance. The goats wander slowly through the grass. Somewhere, on another continent, a kettle begins to hum. A cup is prepared. A familiar aroma fills the air. And without thinking too much about it, someone takes the first sip of the day. They are connected, in a quiet and invisible way, to these mountains. To these forests. To these seeds. To this long human story of curiosity and wakefulness. The wind moves softly through the branches. The mist lifts. The world grows brighter. And the coffee shrubs continue to grow, patient and unhurried, as they always have. They ask for nothing. They promise only a small gift. Warmth. Clarity. And the gentle feeling that history, like morning itself, arrives 1 cup at a time. You wake before sunrise in a city that never fully sleeps. Outside the window, the streets are dark blue with early morning rain. Apartment lights flicker on one by one across distant buildings. Somewhere below, a delivery truck rattles through empty intersections. A train hums faintly in the distance. And in kitchens, cafes, gas stations, office towers, and quiet homes across the planet, coffee is already being prepared. The world now runs on schedules so demanding that entire industries begin before dawn. Bakers knead dough beneath fluorescent lights. Nurses finish overnight shifts beneath humming hospital ceilings. Students stare at glowing screens while insisting they are absolutely not tired. Office workers sit silently in kitchens waiting for caffeine to perform what many consider modern medical miracles. The smell of coffee drifts through apartments and subway platforms like a universal signal that another day has begun. You step into a small cafe where warm yellow light spills onto wet pavement. Inside, the espresso machine hisses like a tiny steam engine. Cups clink softly. A sleepy barista moves with the practiced rhythm of someone who has already made 40 drinks before sunrise. This is one of the strange realities of modern coffee culture. Millions of people now rely on a plant first noticed in the forests of Ethiopia to function inside glass towers filled with spreadsheets and emails. History has a sense of humor. You sit near the window while rain taps gently against the glass. Around you, conversations remain hushed. Some customers scroll through phones. Others simply stare into steaming cups as if mentally loading the operating system required for human interaction. Coffee has become ritual as much as beverage. Morning coffee. Road trip coffee. Study coffee. Breakup coffee. Airport coffee. Late night deadline coffee. Entire emotional categories now involve caffeine. You watch steam curl upward from a dark cup. For a moment, it resembles smoke rising from ancient campfires back in the Ethiopian Highlands where this story began. The distance between those worlds feels enormous. And yet somehow connected. Across the modern world, coffee travels through systems so vast they become nearly invisible. Beans move through shipping ports larger than old kingdoms. Roasting facilities process tons of coffee each day beneath giant steel machines. Trucks carry sacks across highways through rain and snow and desert heat. And still, at the end of that enormous chain, someone simply wraps both hands around a warm cup in silence before sunrise. The ritual remains strangely intimate. You walk farther through the waking city. A university library glows through tall windows where exhausted students revise notes beneath piles of books. Nearby, a taxi driver stops at a roadside stall for strong bitter coffee served in paper cups. In another building, programmers work through the night beneath cold blue computer screens while coffee mugs gather like defensive fortifications around keyboards. Modern civilization often appears to function through an agreement between anxiety and caffeine. Yet coffee also creates pause. Even hurried people slow down briefly while preparing it. Beans ground. Water heated. Steam rising. Silence waiting. For all the speed of modern life, coffee rituals still ask humans to stop for a moment and breathe. Perhaps that is one reason the drink endured for so long. Outside, dawn gradually brightens the streets. The rain eases. Traffic thickens. The city fully awakens. And somewhere, in another time zone entirely, night is beginning instead. In quiet apartments across distant countries, listeners prepare for sleep while this very story continues softly beside them. Someone lies beneath blankets hearing about coffee traders crossing the Red Sea centuries ago. Someone else listens beside a fan turning slowly in warm darkness. Someone is already asleep, headphones still resting nearby while your voice drifts unnoticed into dreams. Sleep history videos would probably confuse medieval monks tremendously. But perhaps they would also understand them. After all, coffee has always lived beside wakefulness and night. In Yemen, mystics drank it to stay awake through prayer. In Ottoman cities, storytellers served it during evening gatherings. In Europe, scholars drank it beneath candlelight while arguing about philosophy. Now millions listen to calm historical narrations while slowly falling asleep beside the same ancient beverage. The relationship between coffee and consciousness has merely evolved. Night settles gently over a mountain coffee farm. The air smells of damp soil and leaves cooling after rain. Insects sing from the darkness beyond the trees. Far below, small village lights flicker softly against the hillsides like fallen stars. You walk slowly between rows of coffee shrubs while moonlight glimmers across glossy leaves. At first glance, coffee farming appears simple. Plant tree. Pick berry. Drink coffee. Human beings do enjoy pretending agriculture is straightforward right up until weather destroys everything. In reality, coffee is astonishingly delicate. The plant prefers very specific conditions: high altitude, moderate rainfall, stable temperatures, rich volcanic soil, careful shade, and enormous patience. Too much heat harms it. Too much rain harms it. Too little rain harms it. Unexpected frost harms it. Coffee plants behave somewhat like aristocrats who become deeply offended whenever the environment fails to meet expectations. Farmers know this intimately. You kneel beside a branch heavy with red cherries. Each berry represents months of labor. Workers must often pick them by hand because ripe and unripe fruit grow together on the same branch. This means harvest season can stretch for weeks. Sometimes months. Coffee cultivation demands attention at nearly every stage. Seeds planted carefully in nurseries. Young trees protected from harsh sunlight. Soil monitored. Branches pruned. Pests controlled. Harvest time precisely. And after all of that, the flavor still depends on roasting, grinding, and brewing. It is honestly impressive humans ever managed breakfast consistently. Nearby, workers spread freshly harvested cherries across raised drying beds beneath open night skies. During the day, these berries dry slowly beneath the sun while workers turn them repeatedly to prevent spoilage. This stage matters enormously. Tiny differences in drying can alter flavor dramatically. Chocolate notes. Fruit notes. Floral notes. Nutty notes. Modern coffee tasting has become extraordinarily detailed. Some experts describe coffee with language so poetic that it occasionally sounds like someone emotionally processing a blueberry. Yet beneath the modern vocabulary lies something ancient, people paying close attention to plants. You continue walking through the farm. Crickets chirp. Wind moves gently through shade trees overhead. Coffee farming remains tied deeply to geography and climate. Entire communities across Latin America, Africa, and Asia depend upon the crop economically. Generations grow up beside these fields learning harvest rhythms almost instinctively. And yet the future feels uncertain. Climate change threatens many traditional coffee-growing regions. Rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and spreading plant diseases create serious challenges for farmers around the world. Some scientists now worry that suitable coffee-growing land may shrink significantly over the coming decades. Which creates one of history's stranger ironies: humanity became so dependent on coffee that we may accidentally endanger the environments that produce it. Researchers work constantly to develop more resilient coffee varieties. Farmers experiment with shade systems and sustainable methods. Conservationists protect wild Ethiopian coffee forests where genetic diversity still survives naturally. The original forests remain important. Very important. Because hidden within wild coffee plants may exist traits capable of helping future crops survive disease, drought, and rising temperatures. In a sense, humanity still depends on those ancient mountains. The night has grown very quiet. Outside, rain has finally stopped falling. The streets glisten beneath pale street lamps, reflecting gold and silver across empty roads. Somewhere in the distance, a late train moves softly through the darkness with a sound almost gentle enough to become part of a dream. You sit beside a window with one final cup of coffee slowly cooling in your hands. The room is dim. The world is calm. And the long journey of coffee is nearly complete. It began in the forests of Ethiopia beneath mist-covered mountains where goats wandered among wild shrubs heavy with red berries. It crossed the Red Sea into Yemen where mystics drank it to remain awake through long nights of prayer. It traveled aboard crowded merchant ships through dangerous waters and desert ports filled with noise and spices and arguments shouted beneath hot stone walls. Then came the great coffee houses. Ottoman storytellers. European philosophers. Merchants. Sailors. Revolutionaries. Students. Workers. Entire centuries passed beside steaming cups. Empires rose while coffee cooled on wooden tables. Wars began. Governments changed. Scientific discoveries spread. Newspapers circulated. Ideas moved from one human mind to another while dark bitter coffee sat nearby almost casually witnessing history unfold. And through it all, the plant itself remained remarkably unchanged. Small white flowers. Green leaves. Red fruit. 2 seeds hidden inside each berry. Such ordinary things. You watch steam rise slowly from the cup before you. For a moment, it resembles morning fog drifting once more across Ethiopian hills. Perhaps that is why coffee feels strangely timeless. Because every cup quietly connects distant worlds, ancient forests, desert caravans, storm-tossed ships, crowded cafes, silent kitchens before sunrise. You think about all the people who touched this story along the way. Farmers rising before dawn. Workers harvesting berries beneath tropical heat. Sailors crossing oceans beneath unfamiliar stars. Roasters listening carefully to cracking beans. Baristas opening cafes while cities still sleep. Millions of small invisible actions combining into one simple ritual repeated every day across the planet. Human civilization often appears enormous when viewed from afar. But up close, it is mostly people preparing warm drinks in quiet rooms. The comforting thing about coffee is not merely its taste. It is the pause surrounding it. Few people rush the very first sip. Even in busy cities, there is usually a small moment of stillness, hands warming around ceramic, steam touching cold air, eyes slowly opening to the morning. Coffee creates tiny islands of pause inside human life. And perhaps humans have always needed that. You lean back while the room grows softer with exhaustion. Outside the window, the horizon begins showing the faintest trace of approaching dawn. Not sunlight yet. Only that strange grey-blue color that arrives before morning fully remembers itself. Somewhere far away, coffee farms are already waking beneath mountain mist. Workers move quietly between rows of trees. Birds call from shaded forests. Fresh cherries wait to be picked beneath leaves shining with dew. The cycle continues exactly as it has for centuries. Season after season. Harvest after harvest. Cup after cup. History moves forward, but rituals remain. You realize something curious. For all the complexity of global coffee culture, the trade routes, empires, economics, machinery, cafes, industries, and technologies, the emotional experience itself remains simple. Warmth. Bitterness. Comfort. Wakefulness. The same sensations felt by travelers long ago beside campfires and lantern light. You finish the last sip slowly. The cup now rests empty on the table. Yet the faint aroma still lingers in the air. Outside, dawn finally begins spreading across rooftops and streets. Windows brighten one by one across distant buildings as another day quietly arrives. And all across the world, millions of people are about to begin the ritual again. Water heating. Beans grinding. Steam rising. A sleepless monk in Yemen could never have imagined office workers carrying coffee through subway stations beneath electric lights. A shepherd in Ethiopia could never have imagined entire cities built around morning routines fueled by caffeine. And yet their small discovery continues traveling forward through time even now. That may be the most extraordinary part of history. Not the kings. Not the battles. Not the empires. But the small ordinary things that survive. A seed. A drink. A habit. You look once more through the quiet window. Morning birds begin singing somewhere beyond the city. The sky grows brighter. The long night gently comes to an end. And somewhere, perhaps already asleep beneath blankets and fading dreams, a listener hears the final soft echoes of this story while coffee cools quietly beside them. The forests of Ethiopia remain far away now. But the journey never truly ended. It merely continued into another cup. Another morning. Another human life. And somewhere beneath mist-covered mountains, wild coffee shrubs still grow patiently in silence, completely unaware that they changed the world. A quiet return to the highlands. Now, as this long journey draws to a close, you return in your mind to the Ethiopian Highlands where the story began. The air is cool again. Mist drifts across the mountains. Grass bends gently in the dawn wind. Wild coffee shrubs grow beneath the forest canopy exactly as they have for thousands of years. The berries are small and red. The leaves are dark and glossy. Nearby, goats graze with the same serene indifference to global trade, economic theory, and international cafe culture. One pauses to look at a coffee branch with suspicious interest. Some traditions never fade. You sit quietly beside the shrubs. The world feels very still. Across centuries, coffee has traveled from forest to monastery, from port to palace, from coffeehouse to laboratory, from plantation to kitchen table. It has fueled prayers, poems, scientific discoveries, revolutions, and ordinary mornings. It has accompanied merchants, mystics, philosophers, and students. It has been praised, taxed, banned, smuggled, cultivated, industrialized, and endlessly discussed. And through all of this, the plant itself has remained wonderfully simple. A small tree. White flowers. Red fruit. 2 seeds hidden inside. The first sunlight touches the leaves. Birdsong rises in the distance. The goats wander slowly through the grass. Somewhere, on another continent, a kettle begins to hum. A cup is prepared. A familiar aroma fills the air. And without thinking too much about it, someone takes the first sip of the day. They are connected, in a quiet and invisible way, to these mountains, to these forests, to these seeds, to this long human story of curiosity and wakefulness. The wind moves softly through the branches. The mist lifts. The world grows brighter. And the coffee shrubs continue to grow, patient and unhurried, as they always have. They ask for nothing. They promise only a small gift: warmth, clarity,